A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 9, verses 1 to 8. Passage taken from the Message version of the Bible. Back in the boat, Jesus and the disciples recrossed the sea to Jesus' hometown. They were hardly out of the boat when some men carried a paraplegic on a stretcher and set him down in front of them. Jesus, impressed by their bold belief, said to the paraplegic, "Cheer up, son, I forgive your sins." Some religion scholars whispered, "Why, that's blasphemy." Jesus knew what they were thinking and said, "Why this gossipy whispering? Which do you think is simpler to say, 'I forgive your sins,' or 'Get up and walk'? Well, just so it's clear that I'm the Son of Man and authorized to do either or both." At this, he turned to the paraplegic and said, "Get up, take your bed and go home." And the man did it. The crowd were awestruck, amazed, and pleased that God has authorized Jesus to work among them this way. The Gospel of the Lord.
Reflections on the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 9 verses 1 to 8. Jesus is back in Capernaum and he continues his mission of healing the wounded lives of people. In the previous episode, Matthew had narrated how Jesus healed two gentile men who were possessed by the demons. In Capernaum, he heals a paralytic, not only of his physical paralysis but also his spiritual paralysis, his sins. The Jews in general believed that physical illnesses were the punishment of God for the sins committed either by the sick people themselves or by their parents or ancestors. Even today there are people who believe that sins of the ancestors and forefathers, if not forgiven by God, could remain a curse of God on generations to follow. In the time of Jesus, the religious leaders who regarded themselves as righteous would not allow anyone punished by God to be accepted into the community. Hence, the sinners and the sick people were marginalized. It is in this scenario that Jesus tells the paralyzed man that his sins are forgiven. It was important to let those self-proclaimed righteous people know that the forgiveness and mercy of God were available at hand for everyone who needed them. "Have courage, my son, your sins are forgiven," says Jesus. With one sentence, Jesus proclaims the coming of God's kingdom where no one is marginalized. The religious leaders were furious at Jesus for the blasphemous words for announcing God's forgiveness. Perhaps they were more furious that the people whom they despised as sinful and punished by God are now assured of God's forgiveness. Jesus cured the man's paralysis. When there was no more paralysis which was caused by sin, then the sin had been taken away too, and he was no more punished by God. And the religious leaders could not accept this concept of forgiveness for free, because forgiveness could be obtained only after a sacrifice, and sacrifice could be offered only by the priests. The faith of the people who brought the paralyzed man to Jesus is worth imitating. They may have hoped for a healing for their poor friend, but they received more than what they desired for this paralyzed man. He received both forgiveness of his sins as well as physical healing. Matthew was careful in reporting incidents of people praying before Jesus not for themselves but for their friends. Remember the centurion who pleaded before Jesus for his servant and professed his faith in Jesus. Intercessions for the well-being of others was much appreciated by Jesus.